wanted to be open and trained and ready for the post-Thanksgiving shopping season. We're kind of battling, when does permit come in? And they were flying people in from Canada. And they had this design detail in mind that they wanted for how their storefront. They didn't actually know what their existing conditions were and how thick the demising walls were between the spaces. It seemed like it was the last minute. So some of the tough things with building inside of a mall, and that mall specifically, is the hours. So patrons that visit that mall aren't used to or really accustomed and prepared to be around construction, so the hours are off hours. In a place like the mall where they're open a lot of the day, stores open at 10, but they open the mall up to mall walkers as early as 8 a.m. and then they're open until 10 p.m. or 9 p.m. We worked primarily off-hour shifts, so we'd get in at 4 in the morning a lot of times, get most of our noisy work done before the mall opened, and then be doing cleanup and planning the last couple hours of the day. If we had work that really lend itself to that, if we had work that was noisy pretty much throughout, so demolition, framing, even drywall, the screw guns were too loud for them. We were starting at 2 a.m. and then finishing up by 10 a.m. And that was just to minimize noise transfer. What seems odd as a mall is a pretty noisy place to begin with. But what really is disruptive, it's the roto hammers and the drills and the banging that transfers from floor to floor. And we had a really high-end retail client above us that was really sensitive to noise and sound. And so, almost a pin drop would be too much for him, and so we had to be really cautious over what noise we made. We did get 2 noise complaints during the course of construction, and they were like 9:45 in the morning, 9:30 in the morning, where employees were getting there ready to set up in the retail space above us, and raised issues. And it was like they had a staff meeting and they were there, and the noise was disruptive. But overall, I think we did pretty good. One of the other challenges with working inside of a mall is we don't have any lay down space. So the mall was gracious enough to let us use an old theater that was nearby for lay down space, but then we had to be cautious over what hours we were bringing some of the bigger materials to our suite. If it was too big to fit through a conventional man door, it had to be done off hours because we had to take it through the mall and through the front of the space. So there's lots of challenges. Aside from that, there's parking challenges for trades. There's delivery challenges. You couldn't take deliveries after 10 in the morning. And so, most people think of work hours starting at 8 or 9 in the morning. And while we were working off hours, we had to make sure all deliveries happened really first delivery of the day. There was one loading dock that we were able to use, and once the restaurant started taking food deliveries, they got priority. And so we had to really time deliveries and time our work hours around the ongoing operations of other businesses inside the mall. Maybe just a couple things to add to that is there was a few days, a handful of days where an executive was coming in, or there was an event, like they were setting up for Christmas, and different things like that we had to work around their other things that were going on. But fortunately, the mall is great at communicating those things, and there were never any surprises for us. They were super easy to work with, and they usually are. Yeah, there are. Every big landlord like that has specifications and certain things they want you to use. They want you to use certain trades. So like if you're working on their roof, they want you to use their roofer. If you're working on their alarm system or sprinkler system, you got to use their vendors, and that's expected and normal. Maybe the biggest issue that we saw is there was a change in the drawings right about permitting time that changed the air handler And frankly, an alternate wasn't really acceptable, and the reason why is the mall maintains those air handlers, and they wanted the consistency and fans and belts and stuff like that. The unfortunate thing is the lead time on the air handler that they needed is kind of long, because it's not a very common air handler, and so that presented some challenges, but nothing that we couldn't overcome. And maybe the other thing that was interesting on this project is that particular mall is redoing a lot of their that wing of the mall anyways, where a lot of the restaurants are, and they had this design detail in mind that they wanted for how their storefront, the neutral piers around the storefront were supposed to look, and they didn't actually know what their existing conditions were and how thick the demising walls were between the spaces. And so it seemed like it was the last minute, and we had this demoed and we had it framed and we had an idea, and we were going from our mall's representative back to the mall's in-house designer back and forth a few times to really set the detail and the standard that was going to be the expectation of every other restaurant that gets renovated over the next couple of years. I don't know that there's a most critical stage for coordination with the architect. When we were doing layout of walls and trying to match what was shown inside of an existing suite, that you would think that the drawings, I guess, made it look like this was a perfect rectangle, but it was actually skewed. One side of it was longer than the other, so it wasn't perfectly square. It wasn't a perfect rectangle, rather. And so we were trying to lay out these walls, and the reason the walls were so important is like a half-inch movement one way or another, and in certain places equipment wouldn't fit. It was loaded that densely. We were fortunate that the architect on this project was fantastic to work with. We've worked with them a number of times, and that we know how their drawings are, we know how their process works, and we didn't have a lot of RFIs. We're able to get on the phone and walk through something with them, or FaceTime with them and send a bunch of pictures and have a quick conversation on how to adjust something, and the responsiveness was quick, and it was spot on, and it was super easy to work with, and so that really helps a lot. They did come out, when we asked them to throughout the course of the project, but I think because of our past, we were able to do most of that over the phone and via even minimal RFIs. So it was quite a low number for a project that had as many components with tight tolerances as this one did. Yeah, there's always a couple. It's hard to catch everything at the design phase, but literally there was only a couple, and we worked through them and quickly came up with solutions. The client was a big part of that as well. So, they have a functionality and a purpose behind the things that they need, and so form matters as well, though, to the mall. And so you're kind of battling like appearance and function and getting everything to fit in a small space. And so it wasn't like none of the things that I'm thinking of were details that were a appearance thing as much, but how does this drain efficiently? How does this get from here to there? And some of that's probably just because this was a fast design process. But again, just having an architect that's willing to jump in and look at what needs to be changed or altered to fit the space really makes a big difference. And it went together as well as you would hope, or as good as we could hope. It was a great project. I would gladly do this one again and again and again, and working with the same team. One specific example was just like the water heater venting. So we had an instant or an on-demand gas-fired water heater, and the models all have different venting requirements, and we actually couldn't vent the water heater where we needed to. So the design team, in a matter of hours, really jumped in and switched to a conventional tanked water heater. We found a location that would fit. It wasn't the location that was on the original drawings, but between the owner and the architect and us, and literally in a matter of hours, we switched a water heater out, which affected electrical, it affected plumbing, and it affected ceiling grid to get this done. And I'm pretty amazed that the team was able to work together that quickly and solve an issue that on previous projects that would have been a week-long issue waiting for an answer. And I'm super happy that everyone involved in this was on board with making decisions quickly and making it happen. Well, this project was slated to be done, and they wanted to be open and trained and ready for the Black Friday post-Thanksgiving shopping season. And so, we're kind of battling, when does permit come in, and how much time is that before the Thanksgiving holiday, and giving them enough time. They were flying people in from Canada for training, they were hiring new employees, and we needed to not just be done right before Thanksgiving, but enough time that they could make sure that these employees that were trained at another one of their restaurants could then come and operate in this space in a little bit slower, they hoped, than Black Friday, when the mall is just packed, as everyone knows. And we were able to do that. So we were able to work with the city, get the permit, get started right away. We got favorable inspection times. We did have a few missed opportunities because the city of Scottsdale was busy. They've been super busy, and they're short-staffed on inspectors. And because we were working basically nights, like 2 a.m. to 10 a.m. was the crew shift, we didn't have the opportunity for trades to be there when the inspector would come at, say, 4 in the afternoon, or 3 in the afternoon, or 2 in the afternoon. They were gone for the day. So being able to have a good relationship with the city of Scottsdale, have a good relationship with the mall, and then be able to push all this stuff through and have everyone understand that, hey, this opening date is important. And also including Maricopa County Health Department, and understanding that, hey, we need to get training done, and we need to get people in here so they can open before this holiday. It just seemed like everyone understood how important this was to the tenant, and everyone just did what they could, and it came together. I think it's this project was a great example of good relationships and honest people doing honest work, and everyone else understanding that and seeing that, and working together to make it happen. One thing on this project that we were fortunate to do is the electrician and the plumber and HVAC that we worked with on this project. They all walked this space. We did a really extensive job walk on this one. We opened ceilings, we looked what was above, and really got to see the space ahead of time and confirm where things did align with the drawings and where things might be challenges. There's always existing conditions there, like this space had existing chilled water pipes that ran right through where we needed to run grease duct, and so we were kind of prepared for a lot of this stuff going into it, and knew the things that, like, hey, we couldn't see this at the bid walk time exactly, but as soon as we get demo done, we want to be in there looking at these things. And so literally on the second day on the job, I had the electrical foreman, plumbing foreman, and HVAC foreman come in and review the space so they could go back and look, okay, is what is drawn and shown here going to work with the existing conditions? And that happened as soon as the ceiling was down. It would be better if it was earlier, but functionally in a space this size and a project this size, there's really just not any more time. But knowing that those kind of things come up, us and those trade partners, we all knew that was going to be important. So we just planned to be there on the second day, looking above ceiling and what was there. Coordination was like mostly it was phone calls. So fortunately, Scottsdale Fire, Scottsdale Building Department, and Maricopa County Health Department are great entities. We had great inspectors, and we were able to schedule inspections, but then also call and talk to the inspector and ask about times, and really let them know what we were looking at when they got there. And so not only were we able to get inspections at times that we really needed to, we were able to really gear them up to be efficient when they came in, so they could plan their schedule accordingly and know what we were looking for and what we needed and what was next. And they were always really good about sharing what vacation times that were coming up and other logistics concerns, especially as we were coming through multiple holidays and trying to get this thing done off hours. I could not have asked for better authorities having jurisdiction coming in and looking at this. I mean, all of them top to bottom were great, and we were not perfect. We did not pass every inspection the first time. We had a failed fire inspection. We had a health department that really looked at what we were doing, and like the plan set came in for the health permit a little bit late, and so their first inspection, they walked through the drawings with me, reviewed and then approved the drawings for permit at their first inspection, and then scheduled the subsequent inspections right there on site. And I really could not have asked for more. And I think that comes down to, they would show up on site and they'd see a clean and safe site that was orderly, and what we were asking them to inspect was done and ready. And so I think there was some trust initially on this project as well as past projects that showed that we knew what we were doing, and we knew how to work within a space like this, and we knew how to work alongside them respectfully and professionally, and I think that goes a long ways. So this restaurant had 2 commercial kitchen hoods, and kitchen hoods in a commercial space have large grease ducts, and so it's called a grease duct, but it's a fully welded. This one was fully welded. Some of them are bolted together, but they have to be smoke tested, so they're very tight compared to conventional ductwork. They've got a higher pressure rating, and there's obviously fire issues associated with grease. But we have a 24-inch diameter duct running through a ceiling space that's only 3.5 feet tall, and we've got existing chilled water piping. We've got existing issues above ceiling that we have to work around. That was definitely the biggest issue. So not just running through our space, but then upstairs, we were on the bottom floor of a 3-story space. And so once we got to the back of our suite, that exhaust went up 40 feet into the air. And then there was an old exhaust fan on the roof and a new exhaust fan that went on. The new fan was about 7 feet tall. And so we were coordinating a crane to get that fan on and off, and the new fan on and the old fan off, as well as old ductwork off. So coordination, that takes quite a bit. And then when you're talking about a piece of ductwork that is that big, it affects lighting and conduit and fire sprinkler and all sorts of issues. Another thing that the mall's doing is they're going through and getting rid of old Excel fire sprinkler pipe that's starting to leak over time as part of a maintenance thing. They're going through and replacing it, and so we found several runs that ran through our space that we had to replace that piping, and not something that was planned for, not something that was expected, but you add a little bit of time, a couple days, and it starts to impact everything. But again, I could not have been more happy with our trade partners on this and how well they work together. There was no arguments, no bickering, no disagreements. Everyone was just focused on the mission, and we knew what took priority as far as space, because grease duct has to have slope to it. Plumbing vents have to have slope to it. Electrical doesn't have to have slope. So we just got the right people in the right order, and we really didn't run into many issues. It was pretty miraculous how well this one went together. I imagine that's a pretty early thing. They're looking at kitchen equipment layouts, where equipment needs to be, what they need to be adjacent to, and how much working space they need, and also how many people need to be in the space so they're able to pass by each other safely and also meet code. This, I don't know how early they did it on this one. This is was for a corporation that's done lots and lots of restaurants, so they have a really good understanding of what needs to be by what and how people need to work. But I know that the design on this happened quickly, the permitting happened quickly, and the construction happened quickly. But I think that has a lot to do with that the company, Edo Japan, really knows what they are building, and the architect listened to that and drew what they needed, and then we built what they drew and communicated well. And I think that this was a great example of quickly moving from design concept to completion in a very, very short amount of time. So how early should they be involved in kitchen layouts or start looking at kitchen layouts? I imagine that's one of the very first things that they do. They get a space and they say, okay, let's fit the kitchen in here, and then architecturally design everything around it, would be my guess. But this one was, I would say, a very good standard, and a very good pace at which they did those things. Probably the only one was that air handler. It's just not a goofy, but it's not a very common air handler. And so there wasn't any available. We had to have one custom ordered. It had a lead time longer than the project. And the unfortunate thing is it was changed at the last minute. And so it actually came late, and we got the space opened and then it's getting switched out. So that's probably the only real hiccup in the whole project. But what's good about that is we were like weeks into the project when we discovered that, hey, this was going to be an issue. And so it didn't turn into a massive problem. Our client was very understanding, and the mall was very understanding. The mall actually said, yeah, this is actually a problem a lot of times, and you guys caught it early. And it's not an issue for us, and it's not an issue for the tenant. And then for us as contractors, we're just going to make it happen for him, or did make it happen for him. That was probably the biggest issue in the whole job, was that. And there was a lot of moments that were stressful dealing with that, trying to make all the parts come together. But for that being the biggest issue and how we handled it, I'm more than pleased with everyone involved. One of the phrases I say, I've been saying this for a number of years, is I prefer to focus on what's right and not who's right. And it seems like the challenge that has come up on projects in the past is, and there's memes about it, and there's jokes about it, and there's all sorts of stuff where it's like, I don't want to answer that because I'm wrong, or I don't want to ask that question because I'm wrong, or we're avoiding an issue. But when you have all parties involved that are focusing on what's right instead of who's right, so that means focusing on the solution to a problem, or working around a challenge, rather than, no, that's not my problem, you are wrong, you fix it, you figure it out, which does sometimes happen. You get a totally different outcome. So, it's pretty evident who made a mistake, or, and sometimes it's not a matter of mistake, it's a matter of not being able to see something, until it's uncovered, or until two things get in close proximity to each other. But, That phrase, I say that phrase for a reason, and focusing on who's right, or focusing on what's right, not who's right, is super important. And again, on this project, I could not have asked for more, from the corporation to the franchisee to the architect and the landlord and to us and all of our trade partners. That was very common throughout. There was never a time that I can recall that progress slowed because people were worried about who was right instead of what was right. If we were starting this project again, the first thing that I would do differently is I would hope for just a little bit more time on the front end before we started to get everything in place. The time frame between when our bid went in, our bid was proposed or accepted, and our contract was executed, and then start of construction was a very short period of time, maybe just a touch too short. One thing that I've learned over the years that people get in trouble with is if they take too long on procurement. So that's like, as a GC, that's writing contracts and purchase orders to our suppliers and subcontractors. If they take too long on that, and then they take too long on submittals, so submitting a document like, here is the plumbing fixture X, the mop sink or what have you that we're going to use on the project, and getting the architect to review that and back to us so that we can order it and get it on site. If that process takes too long at the beginning, what happens is then you get into the churn of the project. You start running into coordination, or focusing on coordination, focusing on schedule, focusing on getting the work in place, and those things just take longer and longer and longer. My preference is to, once we get awarded a project, I like to buy it out, write all those contracts and purchase orders quickly, get the submittals handled quickly, and for the most part be done with submittals before we even get on site. That's in an ideal world in a situation like this, but it really helps efficiency, and it helps us focus on looking at proactive solutions and looking ahead at what's coming in the days and weeks on site, rather than trying to spend our time sitting behind the computer doing those submittals and writing those contracts when we should be focusing on the work. So on this one, what I would do differently is just give us, even like a week would have made a difference. Fortunately, this was simple, and everyone involved had done stuff like this multiple times. And so we knew for the most part what we were getting into, but just a little bit more time on the front would have helped. Maybe a couple things that I would say is just make sure you hire a good contractor. So when you're putting this out for bid, if you're involved in that, get people looking at it that have built stuff like this before, companies that you trust, people who communicate well, and then understand how that contractor communicates back to you, and how everything flows between you and the contractor and the client and the landlord at the end. These things have short schedules, they go very fast, and they need to get open, and being able to communicate efficiently and quickly is important, but also having someone who knows enough about this type of delivery that they're looking ahead and they're planning, and not everything's a fire drill. Not everything needs to be last minute and an emergency. And on the flip side of that is because the schedule is short, sometimes a week for an answer is too long. 2 weeks is definitely too long. But you should be able to have that conversation early on. And as each issue arises, like, well, how important is this one? Well, we're dead in the water right now until we get an answer, or hey, we could wait 2 weeks on this. Those are good things. We try and share that, but I think that probably helps the design partners through this, the architects through this, is understanding what's important from a schedule standpoint and a lead time standpoint. Oh, absolutely. This was not our first time working with this architect. This was our third or fourth time with this architect, and frankly, I don't have anything bad to say about them. They do a great job. Their engineering team that they use does a great job. I think very highly of them. We've done well on each of their projects, and Ito Japan out of Canada, they were fantastic to work with. I think a corporation like that could be challenging, and had we been a company that operated differently than we do, maybe we would run into issues. And I'm sure that there's been challenges for other contractors in the past, but just our management style and the way we do business and work with our clients, I think it lended really well, and I would welcome the opportunity to do more work with them. I know there's more restaurants that they're planning, and I will be first in line looking to work on their projects.